Patch 8.7 in League of Legends has just recently rolled out, and even though there weren't any major changes to any support items or support champions, I haven't done a tier list in a while, so I did want to cover patch 8.7. It is worth mentioning that Riot has now turned into a big patch every 2 patches system, so you can expect 8.8 to have some major changes, followed by 8.9 being a little bit more minor changes, and so on and so forth. So you can definitely expect to see some new faces potentially on the tier list for 8.8, but at least for now we're going to focus on 8.7 and talk about the 5 best support champions for patch 8.7. If you go on to feel as though there's a certain champion that I left off this list, or just a certain champion that you are curious as to how they are doing in the meta, feel free to let me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section below. With all that being said though, let's get into the video. Today's video is sponsored by Mobalytics. Mobalytics is a free web browser app that offers advice for builds, matchups, skill orders, and above all aims to make you a better player. Personally, what I found to be the most helpful is the newly updated aggression metric that now accounts for things like how well you snowball your lead, how deep into the enemy territory you play, and how often you pick up first blood. Mobalytics is insanely helpful for those who are looking to improve and climb the ranked ladder, so I highly recommend you start using it today by clicking on the link in the description. So first off, the number 5 support that I have for patch 8.7 is going to be Recon. So Recon received some buffs back in 8.6, and these buffs were a little bit different from the changes that we have seen previously with Recon. The history of Recon has revolved a lot around his ability CC durations, and in 8.6 we actually saw some changes to his AP ratios. So the kit is still exactly the same as it was before, no major changes there. The only difference now is he's going to be doing a little bit more damage. And initially when I read these patch notes back in 8.6, I didn't think that it would make too much of a difference because in reality it's the CC nerfs that he received last season that have been hurting him, not so much his damage. But to my surprise, his win rate has gone up quite a bit. And I don't think that he's necessarily a top 3 support champion now, but I do think that he deserves a spot on this list, which is why I'm putting him at number 5. Recon is just such a great champion because he has everything you could possibly want in a support, right? He has the long range engage, he has heals, he has shields, sustain, he has a pretty decent lane phase if you are able to play it correctly, and he also has really good scaling into the late game. On top of all of that, Recon is also a very flexible champion, which makes him very easily playable for multiple people. You can play him more as a tank and build tank items while maxing your Q or your E and play a little bit more defensive for the passive players out there. On the other hand, you could also play a little bit more aggressive, building items like Zeke's or Ardent Sensor right off the bat, maxing your W and looking to play very aggressive and making plays. One final thing that I should mention about Recon is that they made some recent changes that made him a little bit more viable without Xayah. In previous patches, the case has always been Recon needed Xayah more than Xayah needed Recon, but what they did is they increased the range on his jump to allies in general while decreasing the range on his jump to Xayah. They also made some nerfs to Xayah, so Xayah overall is less of a power pick, and now Recon can stand out on his own and is just overall less dependent on having Xayah on his team. So that concludes why I have Recon at number 5 on this list, and if you are looking to pick up Recon and learn how to play him a little bit better, I do have a Recon guide, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. My number 4 pick on this list I think might be a little bit of a shock to some people, and that is Taric. So Taric, I would say about 6 months ago, was the number 1 support in the game. He was super underrated but had the highest win percentage out of any support by a long shot. Since then, tanks have taken a little bit of a hit with Aftershock and Guardian and overall the Resolve tree having some nerfs over time in the past few months, as well as Relic Shield getting nerfed in recent patches. However, that hasn't affected Taric too much because Taric is kind of a caster support in disguise. He isn't reliant on building these super tanky items such as champions like Leona or Alistar, and instead he can go for the same options that champions like Soraka can build. He can go for that early Ardent Sensor and get away with it. And the reason that this works is because he has so many heals and shields in his kit. So even though Ardent Sensor isn't the oppressive item that it was last season, when you are playing a champion like Taric who just has so many heals and shields, it makes it a really, really good item. He has a heal in his Q, he has a shield in his W, and he has the massive invulnerability in his R. So there's just a lot of ways to proc that Ardent Sensor and make your carries really, really strong. And at the same time, you're actually not going to be suffering that much from building these squishier items. Just because you're skipping out on the early Knight's Vow or the Locket, that doesn't actually hurt you all that much. You can still get these items later on into the game and be perfectly fine. You won't be a super squishy champion, because you do still have those base stats that are going to keep you fairly healthy and fairly tanky, even when you're going for these squishier items like Redemption or Ardent Sensor. In the end though, the factor that I think makes Taric such a good pick right now is his ultimate. I think that Taric has the strongest ultimate out of any support champion in the game. It is such a great ability if used properly. It does take a little bit of practice to be able to understand exactly when and how to use it, because even though it is a good ability, you have to be able to time it properly in order to make it effective and in order to make it useful. But if you are able to get that down, I promise you Taric is a wonderful pick, super strong pick right now, and that's why I have him at number 4 on my list. I also have a guide out for Taric, so again, be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Getting into some picks now that I think might be a little bit more expected. Number 3 on my list is going to be Nami. So Nami is such a great pick for solo queue because even though she is one of your typical caster supports, she has a lot of tools in her kit that make her stand out a little bit. What I'm talking about here is the fact that she has a lot of CC built into her kit. If you look at other caster supports like Janna or Lulu or Soraka or Sona, I think Sona out of all of those is the only one that stands out to me as someone who has some CC in their kit. But none of them really compare to Nami, because Nami, if you use her CC chain properly, between her Q and her R, you can keep the enemies in place for quite a bit of time, which is why I think Nami is a little bit stronger than other caster supports out there. Another factor that allows Nami to stand out from your typical caster support is the fact that she has a really strong lane phase, not only because she can poke enemies down with her W, but she also has the sustain in her W. So you can walk up, auto attack the enemy, use your W off them, it's going to then hit them, trade some damage with them, and then bounce back to you, healing you in the process. So it's really hard to lose trades as Nami, as long as you are, playing them correctly, or as long as you're not in a counter pick matchup. On top of all of that, there's a lot of tank junglers and tank top laners that are in the meta right now, and Nami synergizes really well with all of these champions because she has somewhat of a follow-up engage built into her kit. The thing about Nami is all of her abilities are very clear and very obvious animations, so it can be fairly easy to get out of the way of them coming from the enemy's perspective. But the reason that I say Nami is a follow-up engager is because if you use these abilities after your tanks have already engaged, then there's a very high chance that these abilities will land, and when landed, these are very, very effective abilities because, again, of how long the CC chain can be when putting together your Q and your R. Alright, last time I'll say this, but again, I do have a guide out for Nami. It is a little bit dated, but I still think that all the advice that I have in that guide is fairly relevant. So again, be sure to check that out if you haven't already. The number 2 pick on my list is going to be Janna, and I'm very happy to say that Janna is number 2 on my list. Not because she is really good in that she's at a high position, but because finally I feel as though Janna has been dethroned from being the best support in the game, but we'll get to the best support in just a little bit. The reason I don't like Janna is because of all the reasons that she is so good. First of all, she's easy to play, which makes it pretty brainless for any player to pick her up and get some free loot in their games, which is just super frustrating from my point of view. She's a safe pick, she doesn't get banned all that often, and again, she's just really easy to play, so anybody can pick her up, especially those who are auto-filled into the support role. They can very easily just pick her up and get some free wins with her. Not to mention that she's a super safe pick. You can play very far back, avoid from getting in the combat, and still have a large impact on the game. She has the best peel in the game combined with her Tornado Knockup, her ultimate which knocks away carries, her W slow, her E shield. It's just a really, really good kit when it comes to peeling. And she's also just really good at every single rank. You can play her anywhere from bronze to challenger and still have a large impact. It's kind of hard to say anything bad about Janna just because she has such a high play rate, sitting somewhere around 15%, and she still is able to have one of the highest win rates in the game. That is just insane. I'm really surprised that Riot hasn't done something about this, because typically anytime a champion has a high play rate as well as a high win rate, it's a clear sign that that champion is a little bit too strong. But at least for now, she is a really, really strong pick, which is why I have her at number 2 on my list. Alright, and finally, the number 1 pick that I have on my top 5 support list for patch 8.7 is going to be Sion. After tank supports have taken some hits over the course of the last few patches, I was a little bit hesitant to put my faith into Sion. But to my surprise, his win rate has stayed very, very high. And I guess it's because they never really touched up on Sion's main core abilities and what makes him so strong in the first place. You're still perfectly capable of using your E in lane to poke down enemies. At the same time, you're going to be running Arcane Comet, so that poke is going to be increased by a significant amount. On top of all that, you have a ton of CC in your kit. Again, similar to Nami, if you are able to land it between your Q as well as your R. You also have great engage, very long range engage when it comes to using that R. Also, you could use that same ability for escapes if you ever get into a sticky situation. All you have to do is use your R and you are out of there. This champion really just has a lot of great things going for him. And I think that it's no surprise why you see Sion doing so well in the top lane. You see him doing well in the LCS. And although it doesn't have a high play rate, I do believe that Sion can do really, really well in support position. I have personally seen a lot of success with it, and I highly recommend that you guys try it out because I do believe that Sion is the best support in the game right now, at least for patch 8.7. Moving on now, I wanted to quickly talk about a few honorable mentions, starting off with Alistar. So I think that Alistar is in a similar situation to Sion in the sense that tank supports did take a hit in previous patches, which is why tank supports aren't as powerful as they used to be. But if you were to pull out a tank support, aside from Sion, I would say that Alistar is definitely the best choice. However, the reason that Alistar isn't higher up on the list, the reason he isn't a top 5 support for me, is because he is easily countered. He has good engage, but once you do engage, you're kind of useless. You have to wait for your combo to come back up. And you are fairly squishy even with that ultimate. So when you do engage, there's a high chance that you will be taken down shortly after. Soraka is another honorable mention that I wanted to shout out. I think that Soraka is a good caster support just because she has so many heals. And again, similar to Taric, when you have a champion that has so many heals and you're able to proc Ardent Sensor very well, you can always be effective. The problem with Soraka is the fact that she doesn't really have any CC. On top of that, she's very squishy, very immobile, so again, very easy to kill in certain situations. The final honorable mention that I want to shout out is going to be Brand. I think that with the AP changes, Brand did get a little bit stronger, and although I previously thought that Brand was a top 5 pick, I don't think that he's as good as I originally thought, which is why I have him just outside my top 5 picks. I do, however, think that if you are in need for an AP support, that Brand should be your go-to pick, but he does suffer from a lot of the same problems as Soraka in the sense that he's very immobile. That is, however, going to wrap up my top 5 support picks for patch 8.7. Again, if you feel as though I left a certain champion off of this list, or if you just have any questions about a certain champion, be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. With all that being said, though, I hope you guys did go on to enjoy the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to help it grow if you haven't already. And as always, I will see you guys next time. Peace.